for our next keynote, and we're going to be looking at future-proofing procurement. My guest is David Cho, who's Chief Procurement Officer and Managing Director at the University of Massachusetts, a world-class public research university whose goal is to advance knowledge and to transform lives. David, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having us, Sean. Pleasure to be here.
Now the university has 5 campuses, is that right?
5 campuses and the president's office. That's correct. So 6 entities that constitute the university system.
Which one are you based in then, David?
So the procurement function is actually a centralized shared service. It covers all the different campuses and was launched in January of 2020.
So I mean, which sort of brings me into the point of your the thrust of your keynote, which is holistic approach to procurement in an environment that can be quite fractured and physically you have separate locations. I guess those are some of the challenges that you're going to talk about today.
Absolutely, it's an exciting time. We're about to enter our 4th year, and we had a 5-year roadmap that we sketched out early on, and even with the pandemic challenges, a very resilient team and a community that's been very supportive to mature the function. So I'm certainly excited to talk a little bit more about our journey and chat a little bit about what we're thinking about in terms of automation and additional future-proofing concepts.
We look forward to hearing about it, David. The floor is yours.
Appreciate it, Sean. Thank you, and good day, everyone. Appreciate the time with you today. My name is David Cho. I'm the Chief Procurement Officer of the University of Massachusetts system. As I just mentioned, the system consists of 5 campuses and the president's office, and these 6 entities generate approximately $1 billion in annual expenditures. We launched this platform called the Unified Procurement Services Team, or UPST, in January of 2020. As the former CPO for BlackRock, an asset management firm and a consultant for multiple operations firms throughout my career, the opportunity to have a blank canvas and work with a diverse set of cross-functional colleagues to build a procurement platform for an institution of this scale, with certainly a profound mission to provide world-class education affordably, was for me a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. So, the nice thing here is that the prime objective was never to simply keep the proverbial lights on. This is a very target-rich environment where we could make positive change to serve a broad student population that also has quite a bit of support of the citizens of the state of Massachusetts, where education has certainly been a top priority for generations. So I'm excited to provide a view of how we're looking to future-proof procurement at UMass and get a winner to brag about my colleagues who have chosen a path to break the status quo and take on some unconventional approaches that I think so far have created unconventional returns. Of course, it helps to be addressing the audience that shares a deep interest in this space, because talking about procurement to other cross-functional colleagues, might have the same reaction I get when I walk into a barbershop, perhaps a little bit aloof and other times bordering on disappointment. So let's get into it, starting with some of the data points to kick this off. To share the scale of the operations, there are almost 250,000 invoices that are processed a year. That's because we have over 30,000 third parties we engage with, driving thousands of contracts, hundreds of sourcing events, and approaching 30,000 customer service requests a year. When we launched in January of 2020, we committed at the onset that we're going to strive to ensure UMass can conduct business better, faster, cheaper with our partners. So to create a platform that could provide meaningful support to the campuses, but build something that can stand the test of time was critical. This procurement function can't just be recreated to keep those proverbial lights on. Fortunately, the leadership at UMass agreed that this would be a transformation, and as much as there may be limited gunpowder in what we could do in higher ed, the investments would be made to future-proof this from a people, process, technology, and policy standpoint. So in terms of the broader higher ed market conditions, we're talking about some significant headwinds. Just like sectors across the board, operating expenses have been trending upward. We're seeing budget shortfalls, endowment funds are not as robust, especially for those heavily aligned with the liquid public markets for state institutions. Turnover was certainly being felt, and there's an ominous macro trend that higher ed is facing that overall, student eligible demographics are declining. And many of these downward enrollment trend forecasts have already been met early because of the pandemic effects. So techniques have been employed, similar techniques that private equity firms may use to optimize their portfolio companies to address efficiencies. But as a higher ed institution, we're also factoring in how our business impacts our social targets as well. So I'm excited to share a couple of examples of what we're working towards to continue the spirit of achieving those better, faster, cheaper, aspirational targets by ensuring that our staff continues to elevate their value proposition and allow our teams to really reinvent themselves, what they do and how they do it over time, so we can future-proof this platform. All right, so we'll get started with how we created a view of where we are today and where we want to get to tomorrow. We conducted assessments in 2-year cycles where we drew a line in the sand in terms of where we needed to be. We knew we didn't need to be best in class across the board, but where were our largest gaps where we could prioritize our headspace and address these areas proactively. So the blue bars demonstrated our first assessment. The orange bars are the incremental improvements made. However, the gray bars show where we need to be in order to serve our constituents to the degree that we felt was necessary, where those gaps were the most significant. So the team prioritized a list of opportunities and rolled out a few where we've been able to automate with a focus on our AP and supplier registration and onboarding areas. And we built these use cases that determined how to completely overhaul and automate how we engage, for example, with the IRS to validate supplier tax IDs, how we deactivate suppliers we're no longer engaging with, but also found great value utilizing machine learning to ingest invoices that traditionally required a significant manual data entry effort. In each of these cases, we conducted an assessment to determine the scale of the manual activities, what are the operational benefits, and certainly the ROI associated with building or outright buying the tool set, which helps us deploy these automation in phases. The figures on the right on this page just show a few statistics that point out the magnitude of the areas we're trying to automate. It's an iterative process that is already bearing some fruit in a very young function like ours, so we can work smarter over time. Today, we're already using a combination of RPA, that's robotic process automation, machine learning and AI, automation with the IRS to validate those suppliers, ingesting thousands of invoices that were traditionally manually inputted, as I mentioned earlier, and in some cases were even outsourced. They're now transferred into workflows with very little human interaction in-house. We've also embedded automation processes to ensure third parties are vetted properly and are not included on government debarred lists. These are all in production today and at a much more competitive cost than most would imagine. So in the near future, there will be more to come as we look to potential forms of chat, for example, to provide better and faster engagement with stakeholders, and other automated intelligence that will allow UMass to consider more efficient ways of conducting business. So I'm going to drill down further on 2 examples that I highlighted. The following page, this is a great example of what's in production today. UMass processes over 250,000 invoices a year. A significant portion of these invoices need and will always need to be manually entered for the foreseeable future. UMass was the very first to deploy an automation technology over the Jagger Byways platform. The team started to teach the platform how to process more invoices over the past year, and accuracy levels increased along with the sheer number of invoices that were processed. So over time, the accuracy started to stabilize throughout this process, and we started to see a dramatic increase in ingestion of manual invoices to the system. So the outcome is we've been able to obtain efficiency gains that allow for greater accuracy, certainly greater speed, but production levels that are equivalent to at least 2 full-time employees at a fraction of the cost. What was really cool to hear is the recent observation of a senior UMass academic faculty member, Dr. Amit Dokar, who specializes in data science, process management, and machine learning domains. After he reviewed what's been deployed so far and how we are targeting future state automation, he expressed that quote you're seeing. He hadn't witnessed such a comprehensive integration of technology in the public sector, particularly within the higher ed industry. Considering we're in the business of learning, it was really invigorating to hear that kind of validation from a subject matter expert like him. But even more impactful than that is that I'm very proud of many team members who reinvented themselves to build this platform out to the extent that the system is not only processing invoices, but allows our accounts payable professionals to focus more time and effort on solutioning and remediating problems over manual data entry. That is a key target to ensure that we're future-proofing team members with higher value skill sets that are highly transferable to other roles while building more efficiencies that allow us to do more for less. Getting our resources who were more operational at first and elevating them to more value-added roles. So now let's touch on one future state opportunity here. One of the key things that many of us are excited to work for our diverse constituents at UMass is that we get the support and their willingness to launch proof of concepts, POCs, to allow the trial of certain applications. In a new POC we're looking at how to test and transform our contact center using AI. Currently, UMass takes in over 30,000 service requests per year. These are generally handled by only 3 FTEs and interns when available. The mix of these requests, they could be simple things illustrated in the red boxes, such as asking, hey, what's the status of an invoice payment, or where is the contract I need to have executed, to more advanced requests, those illustrated in black up top, such as can we work on building a sourcing strategy for a new set of clinical research assets my department needs to buy, or can I speak to someone to figure out how I can reduce costs with the $200,000 of business intelligence software licenses my team is going to buy in the next fiscal year. Those were all fielded by 3 FTEs. Over time, with the data, tools, job aids we've built, the ability to segment these requests, the chatbot should be able to serve a significant number of these requests without human intervention. And again, just like that AP business case we talked through, allow our team members to focus on greater value-added support, targeting more complex service requests, but just as importantly, allow our constituents to get the right answers they need faster. So to close the loop, I'd like to focus on 2 final points I want to impress upon this audience in terms of future-proofing procurement, because it requires constant improvement and certainly investments. So I'll start with this quick story I was actually just sharing a few weeks ago about a friend of mine who recalled how her mother scolded her for buying a luxury handbag when she had just gotten out of school onto her first job. Her family owned a Burger King franchise. Her mother, after finding out the cost of the bag, said to her, "Do you know how many flippin' Whoppers I would have to sell for you to buy that bag?" It's funny, but it made her realize what her spending habits meant in relation to the family business. So the first concept I want to bring home is, these tools that were deployed are just a microcosm of the activities all of us as procurement professionals are utilizing across industries. But if you can't connect the proverbial dots to let folks know what that value is for the respective organization your function serves, it's going to get harder potentially to get that gunpowder you need to do more. For UMass, the journey is still just getting started, yet at the end of March, the procurement function hit $100 million in cost benefits, different flavors of cost benefits, if you will. Cost reduction continues to obviously be a priority, but tying those great outcomes that your teams have achieved relative to your business, that hits home. So, some examples. What's your procurement impact to the price per share? Those cost benefits can tie into a portion of the earnings per share if you're a publicly traded company. What's the equivalent in terms of revenue needed to generate the same kind of operating income impact? If your firm is at a 20% margin, saving $10 million is similar to generating $50 million in order to make the same bottom line impact from that profitability standpoint. So if we're looking at this from UMass's perspective, we have shared that the ROI, just in terms of savings realized thus far with the campuses, has been about 4 to 5x based on our budget. And it's also the equivalent of the annual tuition of 6,000 students. Those are solid figures that could generate the support to double down on procurement, right? And secondly, in terms of my final point, all of these methods of future-proofing can allow progressive procurement teams to build benefits that can promote both commercial objectives and meet social targets, but they don't have to be mutually exclusive. The efficiencies that you're seeing on the right side of the screen, they're coupled with the outcomes on the bottom left of the screen that demonstrate an increasing supplier diversity growth, ensuring businesses owned by those who may have historically been underrepresented are obtaining access to UMass's commercial opportunities. So supply diversity has gone from about 3.5% when we launched in 2020 to increase in both the number of diverse suppliers UMass is engaged with, as well as overall diverse supplier spend. That's hard dollars, jumping to almost 7% last fiscal year, and now trending close to 8% of third-party expenditures through the last quarter. So, we believe that with the investments we're making today, based on the data that we have on hand, we're not just future-proofing procurement at UMass, but we're starting to get closer to those aspirational targets of conducting business better, faster, cheaper, and simply doing the right thing. And I hope you all agree that that's a recipe I'm sure is certainly worth sustaining. So I appreciate the time to share this with you today. Sean?
That was really interesting listening to that, David, getting an end-to-end view of a procurement transformation in a higher education setting. We haven't got much time left. We've probably got time for one question, I think, David. So I'd like to ask you, if you had one piece of advice to give somebody else in your position in any kind of enterprise situation, what would it be if they were at the very beginning of that procurement transformation process? And if you could be quite brief, David, because as I say, we are running out of time.
Well, look, I guess it's hard to just dive down in one, but I will share that I guess the experience of rolling out shared services, particularly in higher ed, there's certainly a lot of rewards to this. But when you think about the mission of higher ed, especially at UMass, where we're striving to offer world-class education affordably, to make it as accessible as possible, that kind of impact becomes very meaningful. UMass has a targeted 2% operating margin. So that's to keep the tuition as low as possible. It wasn't raised once during the pandemic, right? And I guess, thinking about that mission, that outcome, in this case, building a shared services organization, it makes a profound financial and operational impact. And that's a pretty sweet reward from my point of view. So I guess that suggestion is, at a certain point in your career, when you have that opportunity to give back and, apply these procurement skills. Procurement transcends all industries, and it could become very strategic. And we're constantly striving to perfect that art of influence when you don't have formal authority over a P&L. It's a terrific craft. So I would say stay resilient. Don't take certain things personally. But if you surround yourself with a terrific team that shares the same passion, that's a great recipe for success.
That's great, David. Thank you ever so much for your time today. We wish you every success, continued success in your role.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Sean.